And then Mayor Walters and Commissioner Savas, y'all are the co-chairs for this meeting. It's a very short agenda topic on the topics, but we have the full hour here. I also know that Mayor Walters, you probably have a commitment at 1 o'clock for the locks, and so as do I. So happy to help be concise here where we need to be. And the meeting is yours, and ODOT is here for the first agenda topic.
Great. Commissioner, would you like to start the agenda today?
I will, if you don't mind. I'd just love to have you lead the charge here today, if you would, please.
Oh boy. Okay. So our first item, as Trent just said, and welcome everyone. It's January 19th at 12:05, and we have a lot of wonderful representatives on here and our guests from ODOT today. So the first agenda item is for ODOT to share the preliminary draft of the benefits and impacts to I-205 and local systems. So Mandy, should I hand that off to you?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks Mayor Walters and Commissioner Savas. And again, we're happy to be here. I will say with a full disclaimer, this is the first time we're sharing any sort of presentation about our preliminary draft data. So give us a little grace as we figure out how to talk about this data. We'll be looking to your questions and your comments to help us refine our presentation as we move forward, and also figure out how we can make it as public friendly as possible. We are planning a series of webinars and other activities for February. So this is the start. We've been trying to understand the data and then figure out how to present it. So we have some slides today to share with you. And we welcome your comments and questions either as we go or at the end. And Chris Wellender is here with me today. He's the lead for the transportation data, and I'll do the introduction slides and then turn it over to him for the more detailed information. And we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have. And Paul is here to help with the presentation. Trent, is he able to share his screen?
That should be available now.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Paul. I think I just went through this. So we want to talk a little bit today about our preliminary draft data with a clear understanding that information will be refined and numbers and information might change between now and the publication of the draft environmental assessment this summer, and then might change again as we move from the draft to the final environmental assessment later this year. But we are here today to share some benefits and impacts as we're looking at the planning year of 2045 and comparing a do nothing scenario with a toll and invest scenario, looking at tolling and completion of the 205 improvements project. Next slide, please. This slide shares some of the primary topics that we've been getting questions on, and we just want to confirm that we are analyzing all of these things as part of the environmental assessment. We have the start of our information today to share with you, and we will continue to share more information as we have it. We really are trying to share kind of in real time as the information and data is ready and available. Next slide, please. This is the one I will start by turning over to Chris with just a reminder of what we studied, and then he'll share kind of what we're learning.
Thank you, Mandy. So yeah, this is just a reminder. This area outlined it in the magenta colored line is the area of potential impact that we identified for the NEPA effort. And within that area, we've identified 50 intersections to study. And those were identified based on looking at projections, comparing the project with a no build and seeing where, the larger changes in volumes looked like they were going to happen. And then we also had some input from ODOT and local jurisdictions, and added a few more based on that. So it came out to a nice round even number. And a lot of our detailed analysis was really focused on the AM and PM peak hours, because those are the most congested times of day. However, there are some measures that depend on daily data, which you'll see in the various discipline reports associated with the NEPA document. Okay, next slide. So what we're finding out right now, so we want to talk about some benefits of the project. And that is particularly on I-205, we're seeing some real reduction of congestion. And we've looked at what's called hours of congestion. So, when traffic flow is moderately or heavily congested on any segment of that stretch that our study area covers. When we look at a 2045 no build, we have congestion over half the day. I think it was 13, 14 hours. But with the build, we look at that and it comes down to at most 2 hours of moderate congestion. The other thing we noticed, particularly in the PM peak hour and northbound in particular, is a drastic reduction in travel times through the corridor. It went from about 27 minutes in the no build down to about 12 minutes in the build. And then other directions and other peak hours, we were seeing about a 25% decrease in travel times. And then we did look at reliability on the facility, and this is important for everyone, but it's particularly important for freight. And we did see that, in some of again, this was the northbound PM peak hour, the variability of your trip, in the no build, it could range anywhere from 24 to 36 minutes. So that's like a 12-minute difference. And if you want to get somewhere at a certain time, you got to allow that cushion of 12 minutes in order to get there. With the build, that variation went down about 4 minutes, and the travel time was shorter as well. So a decrease in the travel time as well as improved reliability of the trip on 205. Next slide. Okay, yeah, we covered this. If we did nothing, we'd see about 13, 14 hours of congestion. And with the project, we do see a dramatic reduction to about 2 hours in one direction. Next slide. We went through a pretty extensive safety analysis. We looked both at intersections and at corridors. And of the intersections we looked at, about 80% of them showed really no change or even a decrease in crashes. And then of the corridors we looked at, they all, except for one, and that was Stafford Road, showed no change or a decrease in crashes. Stafford Road in the PM peak hour is actually attracting more traffic, and it's actually traffic wanting to get to I-205. And then on the facility itself, I-205, we're seeing about a 20% decrease in predicted crashes. And that's due to less congestion, more lanes, etc. So better traffic flow. So I mentioned the travel times on I-205 got better. Then we also looked at the arterials, different corridors, and these were the most notable changes in travel times. Some of them increased and some of them decreased. So yeah, Borland Road, Willamette Falls Drive, in the eastbound direction, actually travel times got better. They decreased in the PM. And then for Oregon 43 in the AM southbound, they increased a bit. In the PM southbound, they decreased. And then again, Oregon 43. So that first one was kind of a north segment of 43 from Hidden Springs to McKillican Street. And then the next one kind of is the one that goes from McKillican to into Oregon City to Main Street. And we also saw a 3-minute increase on that. 99E saw an increase through Oregon City from like Arlington Street to 2nd Street, just past downtown Oregon City. And then 99E down south actually saw a 3-minute improvement northbound through Canby, basically from Canby to Oregon City. So those are just kind of some notable travel time differences that we pulled out of the model. Next slide. So kind of an overall story about diversion or rerouting. We did find that proportionately less traffic tended to reroute during the peak hours. And that makes sense because it's a variable toll rate and the highest tolls are during the peak. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That makes sense. There's two things going on. It makes sense because the rest of the system is more congested in that peak hour. So people are more willing to pay the toll. But as soon as the rest of the system is not as congested and rerouting, isn't too arduous, then people do reroute. So, we're seeing, particularly in the off peaks, like late evening and overnight, we're seeing a fair amount of diversion just because it's easy to do. We're also seeing, though, and this is what I was talking about with the higher toll rates, we are seeing some trips not reroute, but divert to or shift to off-peak periods because that peak period has that higher toll rate. If people can make a slight adjustment to when they take their trip, then they pay a less toll. We did see some shift, not a huge amount, but we saw some shift from single occupant vehicles to HOVs and some to transits, particularly those transit routes that used I-205 for any part of their journey, because their travel time did increase on that segment. We saw about a 2% increase. And overall, for transit routes in the API, we saw about a 1% increase. Then the other thing that we just want to point out and talk about is that, this is all modeling and we're projecting things and, it gives us a good idea, but modeling is not an exact science. So a really good idea is to, after a project's implemented, monitor its impacts and see, are things on some of these roadways where we projected diversion, is it happening more than we thought? Then we should do something about that. And there may be somewhere it's not happening as much as we thought, and maybe we don't need to rebuild an intersection for it. So that's a really wise thing to do for a project like this, is to monitor it, and then before you take many drastic actions. Next slide. So again, related to diversion, the toll and invest option, it actually, when we looked at the results of the intersection analysis, every jurisdiction has what they call a mobility standard, and it's a threshold that if it's either level of service or volume to capacity ratio. And if the project causes that to go from an acceptable level to something that fails to meet those standards, then you can say, okay, that's for sure an impact. In this case, there were 7 intersections that in the no build were actually projected to fail that standard. And after the project was implemented, they were actually passing that. So that's the, the positive side of things. And the next slide, we have some intersections that in the no build were passing those standards, but with the build they failed. And these are the 5 intersections that we've identified for sure. And we'll talk about other intersections here in a minute. And 3 of those are along Stafford Road, the interchange, and then Stafford and Mountain Road. The Oregon 43 and the I-205 southbound ramps, that's actually, we're still reviewing that, but the initial results were that it looks like it was going to fail. And then 82nd and I-205 southbound ramps, which is not in the footprint of the actual project, but it's impacted by the project. And it was actually attracting more traffic. It looks like that one may need some mitigation as well. So those are the 5 that we've identified. But there are, next slide, there are about 15 intersections where, they were not meeting standards in the no build, but we could see with the build, those conditions worsened. So those are ones we're going to take a look at. And I know ODOT needs to work out, how are they going to handle that situation? It may depend on how much they worsen. If it's just a little bit, that's one thing. If it's a lot, then, contributing to bringing that back up to standards probably makes sense. But these are the 15 intersections that we've identified that fall in that category.
And I'll just chime in, Chris, and say that this is the conversation that I think all of you have been waiting to have with us to really understand the specific locations. And so, the previous 5 and these 15 are the ones that we now want to dig into with you and your staff to really understand what's happening and then what the possibilities are as we move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. And this, again, this is where we're looking at some common rerouting areas. And this is just purely looking at the peak hour results, the build versus the no build. So these are roadway segments that we've seen some increase in traffic on. I do want to point out that these, even though there is an increase in some of these roads, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an impact. I mean, if the roadway could accommodate that increase, then, and there's no reduction in performance below the standards, then it wouldn't constitute as an impact. But you'll know some of these do, Stafford Road, certainly we saw a few intersections that were affected. And yeah, the other ones not quite so much, although it also plays a role in the assessment of non-motorized transportation, which I think is the next slide probably, which I'll talk about. Yeah, so for non-motorized, we actually looked at both intersections, and then we're looking at corridors as well, just seeing what the impact of rerouted traffic might have on those modes. As far as the intersections we've looked at, there was really only one that had much of a change, and we're using a measure called level of traffic stress. And it does depend, it has volume as one of the contributors to how you calculate it. And this one intersection level of traffic stress goes from 1 is the best and 4 is the worst. And usually you try to be around 1 or 2 if you can be. This intersection, 12th and Willamette, went from a level of traffic stress of 2 to 3. So we said, let's look at that and see what we can do. It's an unsignalized intersection. It already looks pretty well set up for ped crossings, but it's something that we can look at. I also want to point out, when we looked at the corridors, we did the analysis assuming projects that were included in the Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP constrained project list, meaning that they were likely to get funded. Those improvements we included in the future. And we were talking just recently that it may make sense because some of those projects, say along Willamette Falls Drive or Oregon 43, they're on the constrained list, but they may not have dedicated funding for them. So our thinking is we'll take a look at those corridors without those improvements. And it's likely that it'll still be probably similar between the no build and build, but it'll show that those facilities or those corridors are operating at a pretty poor level of traffic stress and would certainly make those projects seem much more needed. So, and that's something I know, and Mandy, I'll let you speak to that, but because I certainly don't have the authority to say what's going to be part of this project or not, but some of those may make sense. And I also know that we're developing that transit and multimodal strategy report that also identifies some of these projects that have already been thought about in this area. And some of those may make sense as potential mitigation. So that's the non-motorized. Next slide. Oh, this is you, Mandy.
Great. So as we move forward, now it will be the discussion of this analysis and conversations with partner agencies, and then also sharing this information and having discussions with the public. Those discussions will be about the data as well as about the mitigation options, and then also moving forward about ongoing diversion monitoring and performance measures post implementation. So that will be coming. I also want to note that with the information we have right now is looking at 2045, the planning year that we're using for the NEPA document. And it is, a requirement for NEPA that you look forward at a future planning year. We also, though, are working on analysis for 2027, so much closer to year implementation, so that there will be an understanding of benefits and impacts early on. And then we can compare and contrast those with the further out findings. So that's coming. We don't have that quite yet. As we've been doing so far, we will continue to share information as we have it. So I think it'll probably be another month or so before we're able to add to the 2045 data. And as I mentioned with my intro, we are planning webinars and other ways to share information with folks to talk about this technical data in ways that hopefully are understandable, to get questions and comments as we move forward. So that's underway. We'll definitely share that all with you once we have our February dates finalized. I think that's our last slide.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think,
no, sorry, well, our last slide is just suggestions of input that would be really helpful today. In terms of like, how can we best work with you in your community when we're having these conversations about benefits and impacts and mitigation options, and any other questions you have about our next steps or ideas that you have for improvement. So I'll turn it back to you all.
that looks like there are a couple of questions, right? Oh.
Yeah.
5 people have their hands, 6 people have their hands raised. Okay.
I think the order, I think it may have been Commissioner Savas first.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chris and Mandy, for letting us take a look at this. I do have to ask, I have a couple questions, but I want to ask one thing right up front is, what was the assumption as the baseline? What was the baseline year in which you measured the impacts?
We're looking at 2045.
Right.
No, what I meant was the baseline on traffic congestion, the beginning, the traffic congestion of today or 2012? I mean, what is the baseline to say it increased or decreased? You had to have some kind of baseline to measure a decrease or an increase, right?
Great question.
What was the start year?
Yeah, so it's all 2045. We're comparing the do nothing option of no build, which would be no 205 project and no tolling, compared to implementing tolling and the full build out of the 205 improvements project. So that's the comparison right there, but it's all in year 2045.
I got that. Maybe you're not understanding my question. What was based on what point of diversion as of today? The start, the baseline as of today, look, comparing 2045 to what point of today, or was it 2015? What was the baseline measurement to say that it increased from or decreased to?
Well, we're using the Metro model. Chris, can you talk a little bit about the Metro model and the assumptions that are in there?
Sure. So the Metro model was calibrated for the year 2015. And that's basically, to calibrate it to say, okay, when you use this model with the 2015 land use and all that information, it provides volumes that are similar to what we counted in 2015. But for existing conditions, we actually, we went out and counted and got whatever we could, as far as we really based it on pre-pandemic volumes, like for the most part, 2019 volumes. We did do some new counts, but we compared new counts with old counts just to see how did things change between 2021 and 2019. And we made adjustments to those counts to reflect the patterns that are going on in 2019, because things are cattywampus clearly with the pandemic. And then for 2045, we basically used the model to get growth rates. And then we broke it down into annual growth rates and applied that to 2019 volumes and projected those to 2045. And as Mandy said, we had 2045 no build and we had 2045 build. And the differences you're seeing are between those two scenarios.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I'll just carry on my questions and my rationale for what I'm about to say is that, so first of all, I would say quite easily that our support for this project was well before 2015, because in 2013, it was unacceptable, the diversion. So my concern is that if it's not an improvement, then it's all for naught, essentially. So that's one of the larger concerns here. So to say that it's even 2019, I'm sure that there are people that are participating here today that are saying, geez, it was horrible in 2015 or 2019. And so that's not an acceptable baseline. So that's what I'm concerned about. So when you did looking at that and did the 2045 modeling, it was based on what toll rate?
So The no build clearly did not have a toll. 2045 toll rate. I actually don't have those right here at my fingertips, Mandy. I don't know if, I know they varied between times of day. They were minimal for like off peak, particularly nighttime and overnight. I can probably find that on if you want in the next few minutes, but I wasn't sure yet because these were representative toll rates and the tolls are going to be set by the OTC, is my understanding. Is that right, Mandy?
That's correct. So we use modeling assumptions so that we can make sure that we fully capture the full range of potential community and environmental impacts in the environmental assessment. And then once the environmental analysis phase is complete, there's additional traffic and revenue analysis that's done. There's multiple levels of that, culminating in what's called an investment grade analysis. And that information is what will be used for the Transportation Commission to ultimately move forward with the toll rate setting process. I don't know the 2045 rates either because they do adjust with inflation moving forward, but my recollection is that the peak hour, the highest peak hour toll would be about $2 for each of the bridges. So a $2 toll at Tualatin and at Abernathy. So if you were to go during the peak of the peak hours, you might, and you go across both of those bridges, you might have a $4 toll. If you were only going to do one of those bridges, it would be just a toll for that bridge.
Okay. Well, that helps a little bit. I guess my concern is that, what is the, what is $2? If that's in 2045 value or dollars, that's not very much money, right? That's a pretty modest amount probably in 2045. But I just think the value of money ought to be a factor in all of that. I would assume that one might project what a, I hate to say these words, pains me, but let's just say the toll's $10 or it's $12. I think the higher the amount is, the more likely the diversion is, and that's then a primary concern. And again, is that measured in today's dollars when you did the analysis? I saw on your slide that you have forthcoming here in the near future the 2027 numbers, which I think are probably closer to reality that we can all relate to. And that will be helpful because that'll be timed with approximately when this all rolls out. So I look forward to that. I see a lot of hands up. I'll stop there. Just want to make those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
I guess mine's more of a comment to your question to how can you work with the communities. And I know you're doing some outreach to them, but I'm wondering, like you've identified these intersections, have you asked the communities which intersections they think will be most affected? And then my second point is that I see you've looked at these intersections that are good and will go to failing with tolling diversion, but on the intersections that are already failing or close to that, and I'm going to pick on Borland to 65th because that's in my neighborhood, and that's a bad failing intersection now. And I know there's more that you've got on your list of, we're going to look at it and look if tolling makes it worse. But if they're already failing, any extra it needs to be fixed, I would say, first before the other ones, because these are the worst intersections already. And if you're going to in any way make them worse, they're not working. So that's it.
Yeah, and that Borland and 65th is on our list for the, that's already failing and it'll get worse, a bit worse with the project. So yeah, that's certainly on our radar.
Okay, Councillor Sherman.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the information. It's good stuff. And I think kind of as a novice, I know absolutely zero about transportation studies and the factors that go in the modeling that goes into it. My life is in the investment industry where we do the exact same kind of modeling for financial outcomes and product sales, things like that. And so I guess, the couple of questions, and I'll just kind of I'll throw them all out there and we'll see what you can kind of come up with. But one of the things I'm kind of curious about is on the slide that showed kind of the benefits, like, moving from single occupancy vehicles to high occupancy, the number of people that would change their time of day, there were like 3 factors, and they all were really incremental differences. Like 2% of the people would do something different, or 1% would do something different. But then the outcome is, but half the traffic is mitigated, or it's better in the AM PM peak. So is it that we are that close to, is the delta that small, that small changes make a big difference in traffic flow? What am I missing there? Because there's obviously not a big outcome of things that are changing unless there are factors we're just not aware of. You know what I mean? Like, if you said, oh, well, one of our factors is the buses are 3/4 full, and that would be a different thing. So that's kind of one question. I'm going to lead off with that one. And that kind of ties into the factors as well. In my world, we called it GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And you have to be very careful with the factors you use, because my outcomes can be anything I want them to be based on the factors I use. And so I'm always curious, like there obviously must be some factors that say if the price goes to a certain level, a certain number of people will take the bus. And if the price, if the traffic gets to a certain level, number of people will divert. And I don't need to get into those kinds of details, but really, so my questions are about small changes and how do they make a big difference on the main thoroughfares. And then tied to that, I believe what you showed, or what you indicated, was like, of the 50 or so intersections that you assessed, 20 of them require future study because of some kind of mitigation needs or things like that, which doesn't seem like a great outcome. So I just want to kind of better understand the inputs versus the outputs, and am I just being a negative Nelly here in my observations? Thanks.
No, all the questions are really helpful. And I will say, like, just in terms of the process beforehand and how do we determine what was going in? I mean, the route is the Metro model, and we have Metro staff running that model. We are, the baseline of what we're doing follows all the best practices that the region does for transportation planning. So we aren't trying to recreate the wheel there. We have added additional tools to get from that regional level down to the detailed level. And at every step of the way, we have worked with jurisdictional staff to evaluate our proposed methodology and our performance measures and how we're going to move forward. So that has all been done with multiple points of review and comment in terms of what are we going to study? How are we going to do it? Is everyone in agreement with that approach? So that's kind of how did we decide what we're going to study? I'll let Chris answer a little bit more of the questions in terms of what we're seeking for in terms of behavior change or travel pattern change. But my understanding is, yes, we don't need 50% of the drivers to alter their trip. We are looking for smaller changes there.
Yeah, definitely. When you have a situation that we call it saturated flow rate, and it's so volatile that really a little bit can trigger a huge impact or congestion and backup. So, but that being said, I agree the shift away from single occupant vehicles to HOVs and transit, I think that's very, very minor.
And an area where I think we can really continue to work to improve.
Yeah, that's assuming the same transit network that's out there today, and so we have been talking about how can that be improved. But it's much better, at least that it's the needle's moving in the positive direction is the other way. So it's at least it's good to see that information. We saw a bit more of the shifting from the peak hour to shoulder peaks. And I don't have the percentage of that, but I could probably calculate that. But just to, it's really, there were just those 5 intersections that we said, yeah, these are an impact. There were the 15 that some of them are even failing standards today. And certainly by 2045, they're going to be failing standards. And we're not putting a lot more traffic through there, but any traffic through there just makes it worse. So we identified those as potentially ones that we should look at for mitigation. But yeah, when the system is so congested, it doesn't take too much, to make things worse.
Okay, because I think I read that somewhere I read that like even a 5% change in day-to-day traffic flow can make the difference between a roadway failing and not. So that's really, I'm just kind of trying to get to the talking points that help me to feel better about it versus kind of like, hey, it's going to be a 1% change. And I'm like, why are we doing this exercise? And I guess maybe one thing I will share, and again, it's from my background on the investment side. And this is more kind of a semantics, how the conversation plays. So in my world, if I said to you, I'm going to make a whole bunch of really, really big investments for you in things that I'm not exactly sure how they're going to work out, and we're just going to see if they work or not. And if they don't, we'll have to go back and fix them. As opposed to kind of starting with, hey, let's assess as many of these factors as we can and pull away as many variables as we can to try to really get it down to very small manipulation points afterwards. It gives me the jitters when I think about, let's just do this really big thing and then we'll just try to fix it later if it doesn't work. So I'm just sharing how I feel about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
I'm not sure I'm next. I don't want to hop the line, but I also don't want to disrespect your role as chair.
Well, you know what? Everybody popped up sort of at the same time. So I'm actually sort of just trying to mix it up a little bit. But if you'd like somebody else to go first, that's fine.
I see Rick and Councillor Baumgartner in front of me. I'll defer.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I was waved on. Okay, here we go. I have a couple of thoughts, and I think the first being that this is an incredible amount of work and a lot to synthesize into some slides. So I want to thank you for doing that, and in particular for the clarity at which you identified kind of your two levels of concern. I do want to highlight, though, that the frame of this is somewhat upsetting because yes, there are failing intersections and failing infrastructure right now. But I think the reason we're going through this work is not to get to a point where we say, here's the degree to which it's failing, and it's failing because of, community traffic and mixed with 205. Thus, that's always going to be our kind of lens at which we look at it. This is largely ODOT infrastructure. So much of what was on that list is ODOT. It's ramps that are not owned and operated locally. It's Highway 43, which is not owned and operated locally. And then when you do have some of the local, like 65th, like Willamette Falls, they get kind of short shrift. So I just want to bring everything up to the level of urgency, that it's not like there's 5 and a dozen. It's like everything has to be at that high level of need. The other piece that really stands out to me kind of plays off of Commissioner Savis's opening point, which is it's really hard to accept at this point that the model that was used is going to be absolutely reflective of what's going to happen because we haven't designed the program yet. I'm heartened to hear that there was a variable rate considered. But were there equity remedies? Were there local remedies in place? Those things I think are important to a fully designed program, and not saying that they're going to completely solve our problem, but those things need to be incorporated, or else it's really hard outside of the diversion conversation to take it seriously that those remedies are an ODOT commitment. And then finally, I know we're not to the point yet, but we're going to have infrastructure remedies for some of these places that actually push and have cascading effects on others on this list in ways that I think we need to start being real, that if we're going to try and do all of these intersections or all of these throughways, there's going to be times when that arterial is necessary because of construction, and we can't make that remedy. So what is the real-time solution? I hope that was clear. It's a kind of jumbled set of thoughts, but there's a lot going on here.
I appreciate those comments, Councilor Lewis, and I'll just say this is not the conclusive analysis. So this is the first batch of data that we have. It does not include remedies. That's the next part of our conversation is now that we know this information, let's make sure that we understand it correctly, and then let's have conversations about how to move forward. Once we are able to identify mitigation opportunities, we will incorporate those into modeling scenarios so that we're able to understand both the benefits and any other like unanticipated ripple effects or consequences from those, from adding those in to the project. So you'll continue to see this analysis evolve as we move forward. And there'll be, kind of the more complete picture this summer in the draft environmental assessment. So that's what we're building towards. And we definitely need help as we get there. And then in terms of the equity and the rate question, at this point, we assume that the rate would be for all users. Again, this isn't a rate setting process, and we want to make sure that we identify the whole range of potential impacts. So for the environmental documentation, it's better to maybe like overestimate some of the negative impacts, if anything. We don't want to underestimate anything. We are moving forward with an income-based rate setting strategy approach, and drafts of that will be available in the coming months. Will be presented to the legislature in September. So that's on a parallel track and will be available for the Transportation Commission as they're doing rate setting in the future. But that will not happen during the environmental assessment timeframe.
Thank you. And I just want to do a quick time check. We have 9 minutes left. So next I'm going to go to Councilor Baumgartner, then Mr. Cook, and then Commissioner Marl. And if we have any time to wrap up, that would be great. So try and keep your questions as short as you can. Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. A couple of thoughts that come to my mind. First of all, just on an administrative note, it would really be beneficial, especially with maps, if we could see them ahead of time, because I personally have a really hard time reading very small detail, and I would like to be able to react in real time to the information being presented. Thank you. I was wondering if the build without toll, so lane expansion without toll, was considered in any of this modeling, or if that could be provided. I also would like to point out or ask if there's a possibility of moving the Tualatin Bridge gantry to have it, I guess it would be west of Stafford exit. So before you get to Stafford, which I understand just cascades the effect to some other surface road, but I'm curious, this has come to my mind several times, if there is another road as immediately parallel to a section of freeway as the Borland Road, Willamette Falls Drive section of surface road is to the 205, which is, as we already covered, already a congested third lane and impacting the area. I also wanted to know if the availability to other transportation options in the immediate areas that are anticipated to be most affected by diversion traffic is being factored into this at all. Sorry, that's a lot of information, but thank you.
I will ask the chair if you'd prefer if we reply to comments now, or if you'd like everybody to get their comments and questions on the table and we can follow up in writing if needed afterwards.
Yeah, that's probably, let's do that. We'll have Mr. Cook go next. Thank you.
Very quickly, at what point in time will you be ready to take this on the road and do this for public groups? Stafford Hamlet, of course, would be kind of important in the number of things. And then the second thing is, and it kind of goes into what Councilor Pratt and everybody else has talked about, but Stafford Rosemont is bad now, and Lake Oswego has got like 3 projects going that is going to make it worse. And so with the diversion piece coming in, what types of collaboration between the two, could they come up with a capital improvement solution possible where they work together so we get the things solved this way? And not only just Lake Oswego to pick on them, but I'm sure like Councilor Pratt said, 65th and Borland. So that was kind of my concerns. Are you reaching out to cities that might have those plans or have projects that they're going to need some assistance on? Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. And I'm excited to get some new information. The first one is that you guys talked about at the beginning of the presentation that the study looked at economic effects, and I would like to see that. I didn't see much of that in the presentation. And as the rep from Oregon City, our concern goes beyond the cost and the nuisance of the toll. It's the fact that the center of our economic activity in Oregon City, our main street, is directly abutting this project site. And so I would like to see the economic effects that you guys have seen as a result of this. Getting back to the concerns over how this is being framed, the toll and invest, the fact that this is an indefinite toll, the fact that it is likely to go on beyond the investments that are going to be made, I don't think that is a genuine way to present this to the communities that you're trying to reach out to. And it doesn't feel like it does not feel like a goodwill way of doing that. And then lastly, I just want to reiterate Commissioner Savis's last point that he didn't get to because we were moving on, but looking at being very clear at what rates are being considered, what inflation rates are being considered for when you're giving us these numbers. Because I think we all see what happened when ODOT royally screwed up the Rose Quarter estimates. We've seen that with just a simple mistake. And so I would like the reassurance here that we're getting the right numbers for the points in time that you guys are describing. Thank you.
Do you want to address some of those questions, Mandy, now?
I can try to do a quick high-level overview of some of them.
Okay.
Starting with the what are the options that we looked at? We looked at the no build or doing nothing option compared to the tolling and invest or the tolling plus the 205 improvements project. We did not consider a 205 only analysis because we've already evaluated that. So there was an environmental process that looked at the 205 improvements project, and that was complete. At this point, however, we are doing tolling for 2 reasons: to manage congestion and to raise revenue for the 205 improvements project. We don't have a path forward to build the approximately $700 million worth of improvements in this section of 205 without tolling. So as we move forward, we will continue to pursue additional funding opportunities to supplement tolling. And if we're successful there, that could likely result in a lower toll rate. But at this point, other funding sources have not been identified. So that's why we're moving forward with those options. And then we don't have our full analysis yet. So in terms of economic impacts, it's coming. Again, we're presenting information as we have it, which I get is frustrating, but we know people have been waiting for a while to just at least start talking about things. And I put in the chat that we're happy to start meeting with suggested community groups. You can reach out to me for scheduling them. We also have many groups that we've been meeting with that we're proactively going to be reaching out to. And as soon as we have our webinars and our online information confirmed, I'll make sure everyone gets that. And we would love your help in terms of distributing that. I'm sure I forgot some questions there. So Chair Walters, if you'd like to add anything, I can quickly try to address it or have Chris answer it.
Perhaps we could follow up in an email, would be helpful. I just wanted to say thank you for coming here and speaking to us. I know it's a big project and we're a tough crowd. So we're very concerned about our communities and the impacts that this project will have. So thank you for taking the time to present to us. And with that, I'll hand it over to Trent to close us out.
Thank you. Quickly to Councillor Baumgartner's question about materials in advance, that certainly is my goal. I know that ODOT was working on this information like this week because it's new information. And so, but the goal, as it will be every week or every month, will be to have this information to you at least by the Thursday before the meeting. So that's at least my commitment to this group here. But one of the questions we've had in working with ODOT and ODOT working with the county staff to put these on is what level of detail would you like everyone to bring this information? This information get really in the weeds, which could limit time for discussion, or we could have higher level conversations about some of the details. And so I think just kind of a quick straw dog poll, like we want high level of detail, just discussion level of detail, or we really want to discuss more. Can you just kind of give our team like just visually with your hand where y'all think y'all want this level of information? Because it's only an hour every month, which is tough, but it's also a lot of information. So how would you like to receive this? Lots, more discussion on the lower side. Right. High to mid, a lot of mid to high. Okay, that's better than, a lot of still bring the information to you is what I'm seeing out of that. So that's what we'll do. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent. So it's 1:01, so it's time for us to sign out. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I'm sure, Mandy, we can follow up by email with you if we have more questions.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.